Hello YouTube. Bane666 here. Welcome to part 2 in the series. If you haven't seen part 1, then I recommend you go watch it before watching this video. Link below. But for those of you who have already seen it, let's get stuck into it. Catherine Cox's article continues with, so it can be safe to say that most feminists approve of male circumcision. And here is yet another statement I take issue with. Catherine Cox isn't doing too well so far, is she? Based on what I've seen, there are 3 feminist positions on male circumcision. 1. Some feminists think it's a violation of basic human rights, unnecessary, and should be banned. An example of this type of feminist would be Laci Green.
Now, as a sex-positive activist, it's nice to imagine a world where baby boys aren't robbed of a very sensitive part of their body, their foreskin, before they can even talk. This argument is basically based in human rights, the right of a child to their full, natural body. Another argument in favor is that female genital mutilation is illegal in the US. Now, while in its effects female genital mutilation is a little bit different, it's still sexist to have female genital mutilation be illegal, while male genital mutilation is legal.
But the foreskin itself has roughly, get ready for this, is your body ready, around 240 feet of nerve fibers, as well as 20,000 nerve endings. Fuck yeah, foreskin! So the foreskin has all these cool functions, but oh wait, hold up. 8 in 10 Americans who have penises have their foreskin removed. Here in America, circumcision is one of the most common surgical procedures that happens, and it almost always happens directly from the womb. As in, before they can talk or understand what's going on. As in, before they can give consent to have half the skin of their penis removed. I gotta be honest, y'all, like, circumcision gives me the creeps. It legitimately freaks me out. Like, why do people do that? Why?
Hey, I can give credit where credit is due. Even Laci gets it right sometimes. The second feminist position on male circumcision is indifference. Catherine Cox's article seems to be the perfect example of this. Usually the argument goes, yeah, well, it's probably wrong to do it, but it's not that bad anyway, not like female genital mutilation, so it doesn't really matter that much. Usually this position is accompanied by a great deal of ignorance on the subject, or just a lack of interest. The third position is the one that pisses me off the most, and that is in favor of it. It's true that this is sometimes because they have been misled by pro-circumcision arguments, but sometimes it's just selfishness and disregard for the male child. The perfect example of this is in the form of a personal anecdotal account. I normally try to stay away from personal anecdotal accounts as they are not good forms of evidence, but considering I am not claiming that all feminists think this way, I think it is acceptable. A good friend of mine has a sister who is a feminist, not your average feminist in name and not much else type, but your more radical-leaning, entrenched in the education system, knows Germaine Greer type. In other words, she's serious about her feminism. When she had her son, she had him circumcised. My friend was horrified at what his sister had done to his newborn nephew and asked her why. Her response was, "I did it for his future wife." If you feel like yelling right now, no one would blame you. I have to wonder what her opinion would be on an African father who had his daughter circumcised, for her future husband. No doubt she would rightly think him a monster, but fails to see she is no different. Admittedly the, "I prefer the way it looks," argument isn't as common in Australia as in the US. And really is a disgusting reason to have a circumcision done. Even more so from someone claiming to be a feminist, and has undoubtedly used the phrase, "her body, her choice." This same philosophy doesn't seem to extend to newborn males. So which of the 3 groups is the largest? It's really hard to say, to be honest, but if I was to guess, based on what I've seen and read, I would have to say the second group, the indifference position. But I can't be sure as I have seen many examples of the other 2 positions as well. And I think it's only fair to point out that, I have also seen these 3 positions in the men's rights movement, although if I had to guess where most MRAs stand, I would say the first position, which is against. But, admittedly, this group could just be the most vocal. Next. On the other hand, female circumcision is another beast entirely. Yes, in most feminist circles it is referred to as female genital mutilation, because the practice involves removing the entire clitoris and usually the outer lips of the vagina. Also, the process is usually done when the girl is older. Generally, it coincides with her first period, that is when she is marriageable, and is performed using a razor or sometimes a piece of glass. Infection and death rates are extremely high for girls and women who undergo this mutilation, and, of course, they lose all sensation in their clitoral area. First off, let me state that I am against all forms of genital mutilation, regardless of gender, or which country it is performed in. Unless there is a specific medical issue that requires it, I think it is unnecessary, unethical, and in every way wrong, and should be totally banned unless performed on a consenting adult, but more on that point later. Having said that though, although I think all circumcision is harmful, there are different degrees of harm. What Catherine Cox, and many others like her, is doing in this article, is comparing the very worst case scenario of female genital mutilation, to the very best case scenario of male genital mutilation. Technically she goes even further than that, as she ever downplays, or erases the negative effects of male genital mutilation. Once again, let me stress, I am not arguing in favor of any form of circumcision, I am just arguing degrees of harm. So I guess the first point would be to discuss what female genital mutilation is, as I assume most of you are aware of what male genital mutilation is. There are 4 different types of female genital mutilation, all of them bad, but some much worse than others. Catherine Cox is correct that one form involves the removal of the clitoris, and the labia majora, and labia minora. This is type 2. I should note that there are variations in what is removed in type 2. There is also type 3, narrowing of the vaginal orifice with creation of a covering seal by cutting and appositioning the labia minora and or the labia majora, with or without excision of the clitoris. I think it's safe to say that both these types of female genital mutilation are worse than male genital mutilation. But then there is type 1. The worst version of this is the removal of the clitoris, once again worse than male genital mutilation. But there is type 1b, which is the removal of only the clitoral hood, which is the female equivalent of the foreskin, with one major difference.
Males and females develop from the same embryological tissue. They have 2 possible pathways that tissue can develop in, and males go down one path and under the influence of testosterone, and females go down the other without testosterone. And yes, most embryologists would say that there are distinct analogues between the 2. The labial tissues, for instance, are said to be the analogue of the scrotum, and of course the penis itself has its analogue in the clitoris. The foreskin has its analogue also in the female. There is a female foreskin, the clitoral hood. The difference is that, and this is one of the great mysteries of anatomy, is that the male has the nerve endings arranged differently in the female to the male, and it is the human male that is extraordinarily unique. We do not even have the same arrangement as other primates. Chimpanzee, for instance, our nearest cousins, if you will, do not have the same nerve arrangement on the penis that we do. It's the reverse, in fact. So humans have developed a penis that's utterly unique, and the thing that fascinates me is that it's been done in such a short period of time, about 4.5 to 5 million years of evolution, which is but in the blink of an eye. So there are great mysteries with the human penis.
If the clitoral hood is the equivalent of the male foreskin, but with vastly less nerve endings, then isn't it reasonable to argue that male genital mutilation is worse than type 1b female genital mutilation? Please note, I'm not dismissing type 1b as unharmful, it is still very wrong and should be banned obviously. But I think this is an important point to make, as I almost universally hear people make the claim that all female genital mutilation is far worse than male genital mutilation. And that is simply not the case. To claim that all female genital mutilation is wrong, yet to condone, excuse or promote male genital mutilation, is nothing but hypocrisy and ignorance. If you are against all forms of female genital mutilation, then you should also be against male genital mutilation. If you condone, excuse or promote male genital mutilation, then would it not also be reasonable to condone, excuse, or promote type 1B female genital mutilation? I'm sorry, but it's hypocritical to condemn one and promote the other. What about Catherine Cox's next claim in this paragraph? Also, the process is usually done when the girl is older. Generally, it coincides with her first period, that is when she is marriageable. Although it is true that someone who is circumcised as a baby isn't going to remember the experience, I have to wonder if it would have longer-lasting psychological effects, as at least a teen is more likely to understand, and rationalize, the pain they are going through. A newborn, who is still developing, wouldn't have the capacity to deal with the pain in the same way. But what Catherine fails to mention is that, the same cultures that perform female circumcision on teenage girls, also perform circumcision on teenage boys. Once again she is comparing newborns in Western hospitals, which are the best-case scenarios, with tribal areas in Africa or other parts of the world, which is the worst-case scenario. If someone were to suggest to Miss Cox that female babies should be circumcised instead of teenage girls, no doubt she would still be against it. Her next claim is, and is performed using a razor or sometimes a piece of glass. Infection and death rates are extremely high for girls and women who undergo this mutilation. Once again this is comparing the best-case scenario to the worst-case scenario. If we look at cultures who do this to girls, then we find that these same cultures do it to boys. And the end of my last video in this series, I suggested you watch 2 videos I made earlier this year, about teenage boys being circumcised, in Australia, outside of a hospital setting, due to their culture. One teenage boy came from a South Pacific background and was held down, and circumcised by a witch doctor. The other case involved teenage Aboriginal boys being circumcised due to Aboriginal customs. In both cases the circumcisions were done by non-medical professionals, in a non-medical setting, and involved complications involving hospitalization. This is also all too common in parts of Africa.
They on a rite of passage to manhood. South African teenagers heading off to the hills. Initiations, which include circumcision, are sacred traditions in parts of this country. These are caregivers who look after the boys during the month they'll spend here. They sing of the importance of upholding tradition. Wrapped in blankets, these nervous young initiates will be taught how to become responsible adults. But there can be a lethal side to this. This is where ancient customs collide with modern medicine. At this hospital, 36 young men are being treated for horrific injuries sustained during their circumcisions. The nearly 300 initiates who are receiving treatment in various hospitals here in the Eastern Cape were rescued from illegal initiation schools and were found near death. Most have been treated for dehydration, gangrene and septic wounds. Some others have even lost their genitals.
It's always been a dream of mine to be a husband and a father of 3. But now that will never happen. I've lost my manhood. What quality of life will I have? Is there life after this?
Criminal and barbaric. That's how the government has labelled the untrained traditional surgeons who've scarred these young men for life.
On a severe stage, you might even go to a stage of committing a suicide. And worst of it all, because it's somebody who is no longer feeling like a human being, like a man, is no longer doing the things that are being done by men, you might end up having to do things which are not acceptable to the community. There's no control now. I think I would put it this way, we have lost it.
Most initiates come home unscathed and celebrating. Here they are presenting themselves to the local chief. But those who've made it are mindful of the risks they've taken on their leap to manhood.
We wanted everyone to go home happy, joyful, healthy. Now when there are children who did not go home, it's very sad.
This family's 2 sons ran away to join their friends at an illegal initiation school. One is now dead, the other in hospital.
This tragedy has ripped my family apart. I don't know what I'll do when it's time for my younger son to go to initiation. I can't lose another child.
Many communities still cling to the old initiation customs, but there's a growing determination across South Africa that no one should die in the name of tradition. Nomsa Masego, BBC News, Eastern Cape.
These boys are from the Ndebele tribe in South Africa. As part of their culture, they were all circumcised 4 years ago after attending an initiation school to prepare them for the ceremony. In their community, they're now regarded as men. And they're surprised that so many boys died during the procedure this year.
When we were in the initiation school, we were 270. But we came back, all of us. But I don't know why they are dying now. I don't know what's going on now.
Circumcision is a common practice in some tribes, but it's also a very secretive custom, especially here in Mpumalanga province. Most people we've approached don't want to talk to us on camera. They say that they're worried about what will happen to them if they do. The local police have advised us to be careful doing the story and told us not to stay in the area for too long. This woman's 18-year-old son died at an initiation school a few days ago. She's scared.
Is it true that the elders, the village chief, has told people here not to report to the police and not to talk to people about the deaths of the boys?
Yes. Yes.
Why did he do that?
Because the culture is a secret. Yeah, it's a secret. You know. He want not to people allowed to speak to other people for the culture. I got no power to ask so many questions for the men. What's going on there?
Police and community leaders say the boys died at government-registered initiation sites where doctors are usually present.
We are still waiting for the post-mortem results to tell us exactly the cause of death. But for now, we cannot really say as a matter of fact that all the deaths could be attributed to the process itself.
Some people accuse the government of being more interested in avoiding confronting influential traditional leaders than in saving lives. Harumutasa, Al Jazeera, Mpumalanga Province, South Africa.
Mourning the loss of a young life. At 18 years of age, Afikile Nokanda had been just the right age for undergoing ulwaluko. But he was never to return.
According to the post-mortem report, the cause of death is listed as septicemia and signs of assault. But the young man's family and his traditional nurse are adamant he died because of a stomach ache.
He was not ill. He just died on the 7th day. We are deeply hurt as this family because he had gone there with our consent. We were looking forward to him coming back home alive.
He complained of stomach ache while he was fine and well with regards to the circumcision procedure. I sent for his father. He came and found him in a serious state and was dying.
Nokanda was the only initiate at the school, and his nurse is the only other person who knows what really took place. But a community member told mourners at the funeral that they should move with the times and welcome medical doctors into initiation schools.
This young man was sick in the circumcision school. Nobody was told. It was kept to those who were close to the circumcision school, and the doctors were not allowed to go in. And in the end, when he had passed on, the government sent a woman doctor to certify the young man dead. This is the irony of it all.
No arrests have been made over Nokanda's death. Sibongile Mkanimpolweni, Nisa village in the Eastern Cape.
When Catherine Cox says, and is performed using a razor or sometimes a piece of glass. Infection and death rates are extremely high for girls and women who undergo this mutilation. She may think she is arguing the difference between male and female genital mutilation, but she is not. She is actually arguing the difference between a surgical procedure done in a modern Western hospital, compared to a surgical procedure done by non-medical professionals, in unhygienic, non-medical conditions. The conditions that Catherine Cox describes are not unique to female circumcision, but are also part of male circumcision in many places around the world. Now let me be clear here, although, obviously, modern Western hospitals, staffed by medical professionals are preferable to unhygienic conditions, with untrained individuals. That does not excuse male circumcision being done in the West, any more than it would excuse female circumcision being done in the West, in a modern hospital. Besides, as you saw in my last video in this series, just because it is done in a modern Western hospital, doesn't mean that there aren't risks, intense pain, and in some cases death. All for an unnecessary procedure that serves no benefit. Before moving on to Catherine Cox's next statement, there is one more thing I need to quickly mention. You'll remember that I said that there are 4 types of female genital mutilation, and so far I have talked about 3 types. Here is the 4th. Type 4. All other harmful procedures to the female genitalia for non-medical purposes, for example, pricking, piercing, incising, scraping and cauterization. This is basically an other category, and no doubt includes some procedures which are worse than male genital mutilation, and some that are not. Next. While some argue that F.G.M is a culturally important process performed in Africa, most feminists agree that it is a horrible mutilation that young girls are forced to undergo without being able to consent. Let's start with the cultural argument. Although I think it is important to respect other people's cultural beliefs, this respect should be limited to those things that are not completely fucked up. And cutting pieces off of children's genitals for no medically sound reason is fucked up. It doesn't matter if we are talking about males or females, it doesn't matter what culture it is, fucked up is fucked up. Culture is not an argument, and probably deserves a video of its own in the future to really dissect it. On to Catherine's next claim. Which is girls are forced to go through with it. Well, yes and no. My understanding is that many girls volunteer to have it done, as do many boys, that is those cultures who do it on teens, and not newborns. No doubt though, there is cultural pressure to have it done, a cultural expectation that this is needed to be a man, or a woman, and no doubt in many cultures these teens do not understand exactly what is going to be done to them, or the possible negative outcomes, as they have no doubt only been told embellished positive tales. But how is Catherine Cox's article really that much different, when she diminishes the negatives of male circumcision, and presents false positives? The last word in this paragraph of hers is the important one though. It's the word consent. Yes, it is wrong for young girls, be they babies or teens, to have any form of genital mutilation done to them without their consent. But shouldn't we apply the exact same argument to young males, be they babies or teens? Next. In order for male circumcision to match that of female circumcision, the foreskin would not be the only thing removed. The head of the penis would also have to be cut off. As I showed a little while ago, this claim is false. Type 1b is directly comparable, as the clitoral hood is the female counterpart to the male foreskin. Although the male foreskin has a far greater number of nerve endings in it, meaning that male circumcision is arguably worse than type 1b female circumcision. Next. Furthermore, there is no medical reason why a woman would need this surgery. Removing the clitoris, clitoral hood, and other parts of the vagina does not reduce the risk of STIs or of passing those infections to a partner. Yes, this is true, there are no medical benefits to female circumcision. Nor are there any medical benefits to male circumcision. There are many medical reasons not to get it done though, it's a shame she didn't do more research into them with an open mind. Next. So it's a tough call. While male circumcision is still a process of cutting up an uninformed youngster's nether regions, it is far less destructive to the person than female genital mutilation. Both are culturally imposed regulations on sex organs, but while male circumcision can be shown to have some medical benefits, female genital mutilation has none. Yeah, it's not a tough call at all. All forms of genital mutilation should be banned, regardless of gender. It is true that not all forms of genital mutilation are the same, there are degrees of harm, but that doesn't make some acceptable and others not. I think we all would agree that being hit by a bus is worse than being hit by a car, but that doesn't make being hit by a car a good experience. I think we all would agree that being gang raped is worse than being raped by an individual, but that doesn't make being raped by an individual a good experience. Yes, bad things can have degrees of harm, but being less harmful isn't the same as being unharmful. And this is the thing that really pisses me off about people like Catherine Cox. Instead of just saying, yes, all forms of genital mutilation are harmful, or, yes, genital mutilation without consent is wrong for either gender, she presents the best-case scenario for one, erasing all harm in the process, and compares it to the very worst-case scenario for the other. Why does she do this? I believe the answer is ideology. The pain and suffering of men, it seems, always has to be diminished, so that only the pain and suffering of women can be heard. Next. And of course, in both situations, there is the question of consent by the circumcised being. A 3-minute-old son obviously has no say in whether or not he's going to be circumcised, and in most F.G.M cases, the young girl has no say in the matter, either. That may be the crux of the matter in the end. Feminists love choice. No doubt there will be some of you out there that question some of the interviews and evidence I have presented as arguments. There will be some people that will insist that the foreskin is just a piece of skin, despite the evidence to the contrary. There will be some who will claim medical benefits, despite most of the World Health Organization saying otherwise. There will be some who insist that female genital mutilation, in all its forms, is always worse than male genital mutilation, despite some forms of female genital mutilation being comparable, or less harmful. No doubt there will be those who dispute all this regardless of the evidence shown. But there is one argument, which really shouldn't be in any form of dispute. And that is the argument of consent. If someone is too young to give consent, then a necessary surgical procedure should not be performed on them. If, once an adult, they choose to undergo such a procedure, then it's their choice. After all, adults choose to have body modifications done all the time, some of which may be considered idiotic, but it's their body, their choice, and their responsibility to live with the consequences. Although, having said that, we do have to take into account cultural, or societal pressure. But I believe the best way to deal with it is through education, through presentation of the facts. If after that, an adult still chooses to go through a circumcision, then it's their body, their choice. Unfortunately, attitudes and articles like those of Catherine Cox do not help informed consent. My stance is simple: ban all forms of circumcision on anyone who is under the age of consent, unless there is a clear and well-documented medical issue that requires it. It's really that simple. One last quick note concerning this.
The top question is from Emily, who asks, should male circumcision be made illegal like female circumcision?
OK, so should male circumcision be made illegal? Peter?
No. One of the reasons for the confusion about this is that the word circumcision has been used to describe the horrendous operation known as female genital mutilation, which is not circumcision. It is an absolutely grotesque...
No, but we specifically asked the questioner whether they wanted to keep that language, and they said yes, and we said...
Yeah, but you wouldn't use racist language, and that is sexist.
Well, that's illegal. That's illegal.
No, that is horrible
hate
language.
speech.
It is not female.
Yeah, and we've qualified that we...
You should never have used it. It is the most appalling assault on women to take
We
away...
would not use the term ourselves.
We have said it's F.G.M, and I think when we set out that question at the beginning, we need to phrase questions the way people ask
you wouldn't let somebody use racist.
Yeah, that's hate speech, which is illegal.
That's hate.
A lot of people do use the term, and your viewer used the term. That's what, and it confuses people.
Yeah.
Male circumcision is a different thing. Now, whether people, I personally would not want to circumcise any child of mine.
You will note that I have used both the terms circumcision and genital mutilation throughout both these videos. Personally, I think both terms are applicable because circumcision is genital mutilation, You can't have one without the other, regardless of the gender being discussed. I do however object to attitudes like those you just witnessed in the clip, and those of Catherine Cox, where genital mutilation is only applied to females, and circumcision is only applied to males, in an attempt to make a distinction between both. Let's be clear here, both are forms of circumcision, and all forms of circumcision are genital mutilation. Let's stop fucking around, and just ban them all. That's it for this series, folks. Until next time, remember, don't drink the poison Kool-Aid.
Okay. As a way that you'd use it for anesthetic. No problem. No problem. Got himself up there.
Christopher, I've got to call you down on referring to circumcision as genital mutilation. My son cried more at his first haircut than he did at his bris. And statistically...
You weren't doing it right then.
Statistically, the only long-term effect that it seems to have on people is it increases their chances of winning a Nobel Prize.
I can't find the compulsory mutilation of the genitals of children a subject for humour in that way, or flippancy in that way. Maimonides says very plainly that it's designed to repress sexual pleasure, to deprive a male child as far as possible of the opportunity of that. The full excision, not just the snip or the full mandatory covenant is fantastically painful, leads to trauma, leads to the dulling of the sexual relationship, and can be in itself life-threatening at that moment. We have the records, I can show them to you, of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in the United States, boy babies who've died or had life-threatening infections as a result of this disgusting practice. That a person as humane as yourself can sit here and think of that as a fit subject for humour shows what I mean. Religion makes morally normal people say and do disgusting and wicked things, and you've just proved my point for me. Shame on you for saying what you just said. Shame on you for saying it about your own son, my God.
Let's move on.
Yes, let's. What next? Cutting the labia of little girls. At least Judaism doesn't do that.
This is a question.
What if a Muslim was to say to you just now, my little girl cried more at her first haircut than when I cut off her clitoris? What would you think of me if I was to say such a disgusting thing?
Well,
remember, we are not talking about detail here. We're talking about whether religion makes people behave better or not.
Let's give the rabbi a chance. I wanted to move on, but let's give the rabbi a chance to respond to what you said, because it got pretty personal here. So.
Again, my experience in my own son, my own grandson, hundreds of congregants, has been that it's nothing like what you're talking about, and that for whatever reason that this has become an issue for you, I just think is excessive.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
That I'm more personally...
There's an undertone of innuendo to this. Let's bring it on.
No, there's no innuendo there. What I'm saying is,
sure.
You know, I've lived through this personally, and...
You've inflicted it, is what you're saying.
I've been what?
You've inflicted it, or officiated at it, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Well, officiated, yes. Inflicted, no. Forget Maimonides. Maimonides has his hang-ups about that.
I should forget Maimonides. Since when do you say that?
Because on issues of sexuality, Maimonides has some very medieval ideas. I ran across the line in your book that Orthodox Jews have sex through a hole in a bedsheet. Do you know Orthodox Jews who told you they have sex that way?
No. I say it is said of Orthodox Jews that they may do that.
All right, gentlemen, I'm sorry to break this up.
That's a Reform Jewish rumor about Orthodox.
We have a lot of questions from the audience, and I want to give others a chance.
Genital mutilation is no joke.